We're certainly very fortunate that we've attracted high-profile presenters for 2023, and we're especially pleased with what's up next. Bob Montgomery from CBS affiliate WSBT-22 in South Bend is a household name in northern Indiana based on his years of experience and leadership in the Michiana news arena. Bob moved from radio to WSBT-TV full-time in 2014 and remains as the morning news anchor. This morning, Bob will host a fireside chat with Indiana's governor. Please welcome Bob Montgomery.
Thank you very much. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come out. Since I'm on the media, I'll probably sit on the left because that seems to be the way that it's supposed to go these days. But on a more serious note, I'm honored to get the opportunity to come out and talk with the governor about some of the issues that are important to the industry and, of course, important to all of our pocketbooks. And I appreciate this chance today. So I have an IFB in this year when I'm talking a little bit too long from a producer's telling me to wrap, and I don't have that IFB or the producer telling me to wrap today. So what I'm told is if I see a red dot on my chest, that means I'm going a little too long. So I would pay attention to that. That would have my full attention. Let's make it short and sweet. So I will not get the wrap sign today. The governor of the state of Indiana, Governor Eric Holcomb. All right, Governor, thank you. We appreciate it.
I made.
You did make it.
Yeah, if that red dot comes out.
Yeah, you might want to get outside the range.
Yep.
Let's get right to it. The state of Indiana has been listed by Forbes Magazine as the #1 place to start up a business this year. Why is that?
Well, on that particular ranking, they take into consideration about 18 different criteria. Mostly, if you look at a number of them, they revolve around cost. Cost of doing business, cost of living, access to capital, funding, what do you want to start a business, what's your employment rate, similar to a momentum index, but we obviously score and have on multiple fronts at the top of the list when it comes to our tax and our regulatory environment. And so you start there, but increasingly our different economic engines around the state of Indiana, here obviously the epicenter of RV production and distribution, venture capital is increasingly becoming very important to growing the local economies. And so Forbes recognized that, and we share that fact all over the world.
Another thing that hits a lot of pocketbooks, of course, is the state income tax. The economist Stephen Moore last year, in fact, at this event, said states that have had the biggest economic booms don't, ironically, have a state income tax. Sound like a good idea to Governor Eric Holcomb? and if it is, is it feasible, sustainable, and how do you pull something like that off?
Wish I would have been on stage with Stephen Moore. Yes, it's possible. Obviously, people have done it. You need to take into consideration multiple factors when you look at the states that have gone that way. I think what the Indiana State Senate has done is the right step, by the way, just here recently during this past session, and created a task force to really dig deep on this, to see that if you replace or remove $8 billion to the state coffers, or $3 billion to local coffers coming off of this one source, how do you replace it if you do? And you'll need to if you want to continue to serve our constituents and the citizens of Indiana and continue to make this a very attractive place to invest. So we've, over the years, over the decades, this is long before our administration, we've been cutting taxes along the way and paying down debt. We've always been a low debt state, but we continue to chip away at those debt levels. And so understanding that it used to be, I remember when, our corporate tax rate was 8.5. It's 4.9 now. Our personal income tax is going down to 2.9 in year 2027. And so as those go down, again, you have to have an honest conversation about what would you replace it with. Understanding that some of these states, we're not sitting on huge oil and gas reserves, right? Or we don't have the coastal ports of entry that a New York or an LA, or we don't have the coastline that a Florida or a Texas or a St. Simon or Sarasota, or you fill in the blank when you consider weather. So when you look at these things regionally and you look at tax structures in the portfolio, we just jump off the map as an attractive place to invest. And so you don't want to jeopardize that as you look to increase it somewhere else. It was last year, we were on an economic development trade mission, and the Momentum Index came out. And they score primarily on three fronts: CapEx, capital investment growth, population growth, and employment growth. And Indiana was the only state in the Midwest that was north of the average on all three of those fronts. The only state in the Midwest. In fact, there were only 3 states outside the South and the West that were above the national average on all three. And it was New Jersey, which just shows you the exodus coming out of New York of people are actually moving to New Jersey.
On purpose.
It's on purpose, yeah. And usually then they go further and they end up in Sarasota or South Carolina or Georgia or Tennessee. But it was New Jersey, Indiana, and South Dakota. The only 3 states north of the average. And so that shows you the kind of growth that is occurring here in the Great Lakes region, in the Midwest, and for South Dakota. And Chrissy None's doing a great job out there, but their population is,
Small.
Yeah, small. South Dakota is like South Bend, Mishawaka, and Elkhart. I bet you if you add all 3 of those population centers up, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And so great that they're doing that, but that just shows you have to look at the total picture in order to, as the panel just underscored, in order to year after year after year present stability and predictability and certainty and continuity. Those are the things that attracts investment to the state of Indiana. Just want to boil it down to a few key fronts.
The panel discussion we just heard talked a little bit about the national economy. Obviously, you deal with the state economy. The one person we didn't hear from on that panel discussion was you, and I wanted to get your take on this. Obviously, if things remain stable, the state will continue with the status quo and continue to push forward with the policies that we currently have to try to bring additional growth to the state.
We're not going to slow down. I'll tell you that.
Yes, exactly. My question, however, is your job is to think about the what if. So what if things turn a little further south? Is the state in a position right now to handle a bit more of a downturn than we're currently seeing, or maybe as bad as some of the projections could hit?
The answer is yes. We're in a position of strength, quite frankly. That doesn't mean, and by the way, we've proven it. If you rewind the tape and you go back to 08 or 09, or you go back a couple years, the state of Indiana not only has a strong balance sheet, both sides of the ledger, but we're also willing to do the courageous thing, and that's tighten the belt in tough times. And we constantly, as you just heard the panel, we constantly go back and look for efficiencies while the storm is occurring, right? And you often learn a lot when you're forced to. And so that's the whole point about, and the culture in Indiana state government, it's constantly, if you think about just my 2 predecessors, it was, aim higher, and then it was good to great. We constantly talk about taking it to the next level. That's the mentality is, if we're ranked number 1, we want to be number 1 next year too. And we want to create more separation between us and the competition. And so therefore, you have to go through agency by agency, department by department, as a state, and figure out how we improve and how that's tethered to the customer's experience.
Let me ask you something that's specific to this room
The
and this
taxpayer
industry.
or the citizen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Specific to this industry, obviously we're seeing some larger RVs roll around. People want their internet access. Of course, kids demand it when they're on vacation, even when parents do their best to keep the phone and the tablets out of their hand. When they show up at the RV campgrounds, are the campgrounds able to accommodate some of the larger RVs? And what about that issue of internet service? Because oftentimes the campgrounds are in a place that aren't in the middle of a city.
Yeah, we're experiencing those same numbers in our state parks. We heard a lot about the federal parks and national parks just a few moments ago, but we're having record occupancy, record turnout on all of our campsites. I know the director, Dan Bortner, is running around here. I saw him from afar, and he's constantly depositing stats in my brain. We've got about 8,100, I think, by now, campgrounds, campsites, and about 81% of those have electrical hookup. About 44% of those have the 50 amp ability or the electrical service, and so we're on the right track. We're continuing to upgrade on these campsites, and as this industry gets bigger and more powerful, so will our recreational portfolio. That's why we're making investments in broadband internet. That's why we'll roll out another round. Very thankful to the legislature as well for another round of broadband internet funding. We're upgrading a little over 100, about 114 campgrounds right now because of this. And so, as has been in the past, we'll continue to work with this industry that's so critically important and to our economy and growing. That's why we're building we're building a new state park lodge in Potato Creek up near here. The first new state park lodge since 1939.
I think we're due.
Yeah, we're due, yeah. And by the way, the market shows that this is, it can handle it, and more than handle it, it encourages it. And so we've got grand designs for the future on that as well. And understanding that there are some, I don't relate to this, but there are some parts of our campsites and campgrounds that are folks who want to be completely off the grid and eat nuts and berries and drink water or boiler water, whatever they want to do. But so there's a little set aside in that percentage that I was just rattling off there for those folks to run around and chant.
Okay, yes, the nuts and the berry group. Okay, understand that. INDOT is in the process of investing about $100 million over the course of a while with an electric charging station. You mentioned electricity access in the campgrounds itself. Obviously, it's no secret that the electric vehicle movement is on throughout the country. Some states mandating such, over the course of the next 5-10 years or so. What about electric charging stations? We could talk about that at another time, but what about electric charging stations for motorhomes and those electric vehicles that are towed behind those motorhomes? Is the state in a position or about to be in a position where we can utilize that so Indiana isn't a place that you have to avoid if you have an EV while you're traveling? Sure.
Well, we'll continue to control the things that we can control, as you heard earlier, and seek to influence the things that we can't. And one thing is the evolution or the transition into hybrid or electric, et cetera. Understanding there's another force at play here too. It's not just recreational, but it's actually a blend of recreational and work. You can now work while you're in the RV in a national or a state park, which is a thing of beauty in my estimation. And so we want to encourage that as well, which is why we're investing in these campsites. We see it as a both, not an either or, not a you're detaching from your responsibilities, but you can do both. And understanding that we're the crossroads of America, we're going to hopefully get you as you're seeing the country at one point or another. And yes, this will require us, that $100 million that you referenced is federal dollars. And so we've put together the package, the map, if you will, of making sure that we're in rural, suburban, urban areas, so you're not by design or at the very outset eliminating parts of the market. And those, we're right at the stage right now where we're starting to roll out the bids, or will this year roll out the bids for the owners and the operators of those stations, and then construction will begin in earnest next year. So this is, for a state like Indiana, who has from the very outset been the innovators in terms of the future of mobility. I mean, we're here at a record turnout. We'll have a record turnout at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on May 28th. We're if you're not from Indiana, if you've not been to the Indy 500, it's a bucket list item. I would suggest you go with a governor. It's a different experience. You will see things that you cannot unsee.
Spend much time in the infield, do you?
But that track was built originally over 100 years ago as a test track for engines, right? And so when you think about the future of mobility and where we're going, we've been doing this, going through a time of transition from the very, very outset of the horse and buggy.
The state just wrapped up its legislative session. Congratulations on that, I suppose. The best news is it's over. the secondary news, I'm
Quiet
sure
now.
I'm sure it's much quieter these days.
Yeah.
What makes you smile when you look back and you think about this session?
It's a long list, and first and foremost, grateful just for the cooperation, just for the focus on the things that really matter. We don't just think big, we act big, and we just proved it. I would say this is the best budget I've ever seen. Had someone who's been a mentor to me say it's been the best budget in the last 100 years. And I think it's because it gets at a lot of issues that we've talked about for a number of years. But because we're in this place where we can cut taxes, pay down debt, invest historically in an unprecedented manner in K through 12 or options for in our K through 12 space, investing in law enforcement salary increases long overdue, making sure parents weren't double billed for their textbooks or curriculum material with fees.
Thanks for that, by the way, as a parent.
I mean,
Appreciate that.
I hear from people all over the state that say that just saved me $450 or $900. That's a
Per
tax
kid.
cut, by the way. Yeah. And so there's just another round of ready, $500 million. You talk about an uber successful program that's reinvesting in communities from the ground up. And I think about just the momentum that we're able to build on right now and really accelerate away from just last week, let alone the last year or the last 2 years. To put this in perspective for Indiana, to give some good news, and I don't say this egocentrically, this is about momentum. This is about where we were and where we are right now. If you look at before our administration came into office, the 12 years prior, when I first walked into the State House and was helping one of my predecessors, you look at what came in terms of capital investment in through the IEDC, did about, in that 12-year period, about $49 billion. In the next 6 years, we've done $60 billion. 6 years, half the time, $10 billion more. Our record year was $8.7 billion a couple years ago. Last year, we did $22.2 billion. This year, the pipeline is fuller than last. We're now chasing deals that are bigger than single years. And so now we got to land all these birds, but we got a really good track record, and I'd rather be in the heart of the heartland in Indiana than anywhere else.
Yeah, like
in the
that big
country.
GM potential battery plant up near New Carlisle, that could be significant.
I look forward to seeing you all soon.
About $3 billion, about $3 billion. Were you breaking some news this morning, are you, on that front?
No.
Okay. You had to ask, it's part of my job.
Yeah.
So you are,
Get that, can I put that red dot?
before I get the red dot, I think I am going to wrap with this last question. You are in the process of coming up to the final year of your final term.
That's so I'm told.
The next
Daily.
governor will be the next governor will be stepping into your shoes at some time soon. What advice would you give that person, and what advice would you give to that person when it comes to this industry, the RV industry?
Don't miss this breakfast. Let's start there. You could take that from a general perspective or from a very focused or laser perspective. In general, it would be to surround yourself with a good team, and the way you do that is by having an agenda that people can not only rally around, but understand they're part of something bigger than themselves or that particular year. Attract the best. Turn the cards face up. Let people know what your agenda is, what your goals are, what the mission is, how you're going to realize that mission. Be informed. Let the data drive your decisions, as hard as they may be. Have some courage to do the right thing, understanding that typically in life it works out at the end if you do that. It may feel bumpy along the way, but if you don't take your eye off the ball, good things are in store. I would, and when I say be informed, it would be not just about events internally or externally, but it would be keep your eye on what's driving the costs, what's made this state such a great place to invest, and then seek to crush the records that we've set. That's why Indiana continues to improve. Is it's not that, you know, my predecessors are proud of the job that we're doing, and they tell me that, and I always remind them of this record, of that record, of this record, but that's the way we have to be. We have to say, okay, we did 22 billion in 1 year. Let's get to 36. Let's get to 48. Let's get to. This is a place in the country that has become a model in terms of that certainty and predictability and stability, continuity, et cetera. And so I would say keep your eye on the ball, understand what those costs are, the cost drivers. Look at the Medicaid, the growth of Medicaid versus the growth of revenue, and understand that that's why, that's the pressure, that's what's at stake, is those are going to collide. And that's why you have to grow the pie. That's why you have to grow opportunity. That's why you have to make sure, in terms of workforce development programs, et cetera, it all matters. Think about what a difference a decade makes, the difference between the 2010s and the 2020s, when we were at a very low inflation, very high unemployment. Now it's the opposite. Now it's a very high inflation and very low unemployment. And so where we're focused is how do we make sure we're skilling up the workforce, because that's driving, not being able to meet demand is driving prices up. That's driving inflation as well. And so how do we, when we do the math, understanding what our population is, 6.8 million, X in the 3.4 million in the labor participation in the workforce, private sector, all-time high. How do we get more people in the top of the funnel into positions that are producing, that are manufacturing? And that's how you grow opportunity for people, and keeping your eye on where's the puck going? That's why we're constantly talking about what is the future economy, what is the future of mobility, or you fill in the blank. And that's what, I gave you a lot more than you asked for. But, I mean, this is a long conversation, but it all matters. And people are watching, and that's a good thing if you're in our catbird seat.
That's a good thing. Governor, State of Indiana, Governor Eric Holcomb.
Great to be with you. Know that dot.
Many thanks to the governor and for Bob hosting that session this morning.